Now let's try a couple of harder trinomials. They're considered a little bit harder because this time we do have a coefficient that's in front of our squared variable. And so because of that, it makes it so that we can't follow some of the same rules that we did when we were trying to factor the easier trinomials. We still are going to factor this into two binomials, but this time we can't just have x and x in front because x times x will not give me 2x. X and x will only give me x squared. And so I'm actually going to need a number. In this case, 2 and 1 will multiply together to give me the 2x squared. Now, if this is some other number, like in our other example, we're going to be looking at 16, it could be something other than that number and 1. 16 could be 8 and 2 or 4 and 4. But in this case, 2 and 1 are the only things that multiply together to give me 2. So I know that's what goes in front here. Now I need to figure out what's going to multiply together to give me 35. These second numbers will still multiply to give me that negative 35, but they will not add together to give me that negative 3 anymore. Okay, and so I know that to get 35, I can either multiply 1 and 35, or I can multiply 5 and 7. Now I'm going to take a guess, and I'm going to say, well, I think that if I put 35 in here, that's going to give me numbers that are way too big to end up getting this 3 in the end. So I'm going to try it with the 7 and the 5. And let's say we want to try the 7 there and the 5 there. One of them has to be negative, and so we'll just make the 5 negative and the 7 positive. Those two numbers will multiply to give me 35. Now I've got to check to make sure it's going to give me the negative 3. So let's try the outside and the inside. The outside is going to give me 7 times 2x, which is 14x. The inside, negative 5 times x minus 5x. When I put those together, I get 9x. Now that's not the negative 3x I wanted. That means I'm going to have to try something else. Okay, so I'm going to rewrite my binomials in the parentheses down here. I know it's still going to be 2x and x. Let me try switching the negative 5 and the 7 here. And so I'm going to go ahead and put we'll leave the minus and plus signs where they are. We don't really know which place they need to be in yet. We'll try switching the 5 and the 7. So 2x times 5 will give me 10x, and then negative 7 times x will give me minus 7x. Now that gives me 3x. Now that does match the 3x I need here, but I need it to be negative. And so in order to do that, all I have to do is switch these signs. And so the correct final factored form will be 2x plus 7 and x minus 5. And that is our answer. Now let's step over and look at the second one over here. This second problem is very similar to the first, obviously, in that there's a number in front of the t squared. There's a couple of things that we can do to help us simplify this problem here. This is very similar to something that you would see as a vertical motion, right, with the negative 16t squared and that type of thing. And so let's go ahead and start by factoring out the greatest common factor. Not only am I going to take out the greatest common factor, but I'm also going to take out the this negative here, just because it's a lot easier anytime I can make sure there's not a negative in front of my first term. So I notice that these are all divisible by 2, so let's take out a negative 2. When I do that, I will be left with 8t squared plus, sorry, not plus, it'll be minus 23t minus 3 equals 0. So now I'm going to kind of ignore that negative 2 for a while. We'll just let them kind of hang out front, and I'm going to factor this part right here. Okay? And so I know that the first two need to multiply together to give me that 8t. Now it could be 8t and t. It could be 4t and 2t. Okay? But I'm going to just go ahead and try 8t and 4t to start with. Okay? 8t and t to start with. 8t and 4t don't multiply to give me 8t squared. So 8t times t will give me that 8t squared. Okay? Now to get the negative 3, I need a minus 3 and a plus 1. Okay, so those two will multiply together to give me that. And now I'm going to make sure it gives me that minus 23 in the middle. So 8t times negative 3 is negative 24t. And then 1 times t is plus 1t. And those add together to give me negative 23t. And so that is the correct factorization because it matches my negative 23t right there. So now what I want to do, this one actually has it equal to 0, so I actually need to solve this one. Okay, and so we're going to take that and we are going to solve it. Since it's equal to 0, then one of the things multiplying to give me that 0 has to end up being 0. I know the negative 2 can't be 0, and so the only possibilities are that 8t plus 1 equals 0 or t minus 3 equals 0. So I'm going to subtract the 1. So I've got at equals negative 1. Divide by the 8. And I've got that t equals negative 1/8. Here I just have to add the 3. And I get t equals 3. These are both solutions, and you shouldn't leave either of them out unless there's a reason to leave one out. If we are talking about time, then obviously this negative 1 won't make sense. Okay, we'd take that one out. But in this case, since it's just an equation, we'll keep both answers. And that's how you factor.